I'm so excited about my guest this week on the Extraordinary Leaders podcast. It's none other than Gareth Anderson. Now, Gareth is the head of business management at Allica Bank, and I have had the privilege of working alongside Gareth and his colleagues at Allica. And something Gareth does that is really exemplary to me and really extra is he manages to hold together a fast-paced, task-focused business which is scaling and growing at the rate of knots. He's managing to marry that with people development, with performance development, and with really caring about the people he's got and carrying those two things together, not at odds with one another. And something Gareth talks about is how can we help our people think bigger, think beyond, and also says that if you've recruited them, then you need to trust them. Now, there's food for thought. Let's dive in and hear more about this. Hello, Gareth. What an absolute pleasure to have you on the Extraordinary Leaders podcast today. How are you doing?
I am wonderful, Dolly. Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here this morning.
Well, I'm really looking forward to this because we work together a bit and we often have good chats. And obviously, I think they're such good chats that we should record them and let the world hear.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So let's kick off, Gareth. What does extraordinary leadership mean to you?
I don't actually have to think too long to answer this. So I didn't start out to be a leader. I was always wanting to make a difference. And so when I think about extraordinary leadership, for me, it's about wanting to make a difference, whether that's to the business, to the people that you're lucky enough and privileged to be able to support, to your customers, to wider society. And that was always what drove me. I never once set out to say, I'd like to become a leader one day. It sort of happened, but I always knew from the moment I entered the business world that I wanted to make a difference. So that's extraordinary leadership for me.
What does making a difference mean, though?
It's a great question. And making a difference means different things to different people. For me, it's knowing that I can go to bed at night, knowing that I've in some way, shape or form influenced somebody for the better, for the positive. And whether that's somebody who feels as though, hey, I couldn't do something yesterday, but I now believe I can today. Or a client that says, do you know, until I had that conversation with Gareth, I didn't believe we could invest or grow. I didn't believe we could back our business to achieve the next stage in our growth journey. And I think that is it for me. It's leaving a mark on people in a way that helps them to believe and to feel as though they can achieve things. They can do it when they put their mind to it.
That is strong because immediately my brain's like, I want that. I want that in my business. So there is a pull in that. What would be great, Gareth, is just to talk a little bit about where you are in your career and what you've been doing the past couple of years at Allica, because that's what I've been observing and really excites me as something extra that I want people to learn from.
I'm actually celebrating my third anniversary at Allica as of Friday. And we often joke here that in Allica terms, because we're a bank that's only been established for 5 years, that makes me more than a lifer. It makes me ancient. So I've been incredibly privileged to build and then lead a lot of Allica's client-facing teams. And because we are such a fast-growing organisation with so much constant change and so much that is evolving on an almost day-to-day basis, everything that we've done, we've had to do at real pace. So a lot of my focus has been bringing great people into the organisation, people that I know are comfortable operating in an environment of constant change, challenge, uncertainty, but people who are really comfortable to charge the hill and to see opportunities where others might see challenge. And so for me, most of my time at Allica has been spent building teams of truly wonderful people who both our clients and our other colleagues within Allica really just buy into and feel absolutely supported by them.
There's so many things within that I want to unpack. So I have a theory that nothing, and I'm probably going to change my mind on this, but my theory is nothing good is built that fast, like a microwave meal. It's never as good as a slow cooked meal, right? However, I think my mind might change a bit because you're building and leading at real pace, and you're recruiting great people who see opportunities over challenge. So how can we build well and do it fast? Like, 'cause to me, that's a bit of a paradox.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and culture doesn't just happen. My teams know how incredibly proud I am of the culture that they've collectively helped to build. But how do we do it at pace? I think it starts from, first and foremost, always being really clear in the why. And so whenever we recruit people into Allica, we are recruiting people who understand that we are a mission-driven organisation. They understand right from the bat that they are not joining this fast-growing scale-up just for a job, just to do the bare minimum. They're joining a place that is compelled and driven by a real clear purpose to make a difference for the businesses and the people that we're lucky enough to support. But everything that we do starts from the why. And over the years, we've got very, very good at seeing those purpose-driven people. And so if you want to think about the way we interview people, interviews in a lot of large organizations are based around competency. Tell me when you've overcome a challenging situation, what did you do and how did it make you feel? And they're very much structured towards, let's talk through your technical skills. And of course, yes, we do all of that. But what we spend a lot of our time doing is really getting to know what makes people them. How do they think? How do they probe? How do they ask questions? How do they deal with a challenging situation? And it's often quite unconventional to be interviewed at Allica, because we will throw all of these different types of questions at people that they will not have been used to, perhaps in their previous careers or jobs.
So can we just practice one? Like, what if you interview me, what question would you throw at me? I just want to see if I can answer it.
So I would ask, so one of the first questions I would always ask is, Dolly, what is it that gives you your energy? What drives you to wake up in the morning?
Oh my gosh. What a great question. I will have a go at answering this, but I don't know if I'll get the job.
Let's try. I've got more questions I can ask.
I was just turning into an interview. But I love it. It's practical. So what gives me energy and drive? I'm so excited about growth. I love going to bed at night going, I've learned something. So, whether it's failure or success or somewhere in between, I love going to bed at night with new information, new learnings, new paradigms. So I think that is honestly what drives me in the mornings. And when I wake up in the mornings, I often put on a really cool song because it just gets me vibing that I'm going to grow. Maybe, I mean, it sounds a bit idealistic, but I do generally. I love that. I love the idea of growth.
I'm resisting the urge to ask you what song you play.
Oh my gosh. So I've got the best new playlist. Everyone should have a playlist called this, okay? It's called Yes. So any song I hear that makes me go, yes, goes on the playlist. So it's got an amalgamation, but everyone has their own ones.
Love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So one of the other questions we might ask is, talk to us about an environment that you thrive in, and conversely, a time or an environment in your career that you haven't thrived in.
These are great questions for recruitment. So a time that I thrived is when I have got lots of irons in the fire, because I can multitask quite effectively and efficiently, and I have high capacity, and I feel I'm in my slipstream when there's many things going on. So I like a lot. And a time when I haven't thrived is when I have nothing going on. So when I haven't been working, or when I remember working on a shop floor that was very quiet, and I found that dead. So I need to be in an environment where I can be proactive with lots of other people, lots of irons in the fire. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. And I think that's the thing that's always so important for us is our people are curious. So the Allicans, as we call them, are... I know.
Really?
Yes,
I love it.
We've gone there. But Allicans are restless. They are never satisfied, and they are driven by a real clear sense of, I want to ask questions. I want to understand the why. I want to get behind and underneath the surface of things. And of course, what we find is that for a lot of people, that is quite daunting, nay, terrifying, in fact, because suddenly you're in a position where, and I suppose the way I would often characterize it here is, the shackles are off. It is there for you to create the opportunity. And I drive my teams absolutely mad and they know this only too well now, that if they come to me and say, Gareth, wouldn't it be great if, or do you know what we should do? They know that I will immediately say, go and do it, make it happen. And for lots of people, they haven't had that opportunity in their careers where they've been met with a, go on, make it happen.
Yeah.
And suddenly it's there, it's staring you in the face. You can do this.
It's something, you've probably heard me talk about it a lot, but it's this, we're in this paradigm shift in business, aren't we? And Allica being has been a startup, but now scale up point. But the newer businesses have the freedom because they're not so wrapped into the bureaucracy of decades and decades of stuff. So, I work in a manufacturing business, and to make any decision change, it has to go through about 400 committees. It's just not agile for that kind of approach. And that old paradigm of business, we've seen it in schools, we've seen it in our Western culture, is very much permission based. At school, can I have permission to go to the loo? It's, can I have permission to everything's been told, you're told how to do everything. This is when you go to maths, this is how you do an essay. There hasn't been any initiative. It's all been, I tell, you do, learning by rote almost. And now we're at a point in this new world, which is relatively, literally new, isn't it? Like the past 10 years, it's been so different, of saying to people, actually, we need a whole new neurological mindset that we haven't been trained in as children, as teenagers, when we were forming neurology. We need an initiative culture whereby you have permission to just do it. And lots of times in business, I see leaders saying, I just wish my people would have more initiative.
One of the big shocks, I think, that I had when I first joined Allica was just how much we celebrated and valued failure, which, working in big banks for many years as I had, the idea that you'd ever fail was a terrifying thought to me.
Well, in banking, yeah.
And of course, we are heavily regulated. We are privileged to be supporting and helping people to manage their finances. So when I talk about failure, it's not the bank is going to break tomorrow. We have all the checks and balances, the due process. We will do everything that you would expect a bank to do. But from a mindset perspective, there is this strongly held belief that we should celebrate people who try, people who experiment, and people that fall flat on their faces from having done so. And I think that's so often lacking across businesses in so many different industries, because to your point, I think we are taught from a very young age to firstly ask for permission, and then secondly, that failure or making mistakes is bad.
Yeah.
I was with my two children driving them to school the other day, and one is 4 and one is 6. And my son turned to my daughter and he said, Arla, Daddy said it's okay to make mistakes, because he said from mistakes we learn. And Arla, slightly younger, and turned to him and said, Harley, you can't make mistakes because mistakes are bad. And I thought it was really interesting that Harley, slightly older, has already started to grasp this idea that experimenting is a good thing. And my youngest was, no, you can't do that. And we see those two types of people constantly in business. There are those people that it is safer to not experiment because nobody can say to me, you've done a terrible job. if I just do what I'm told to do, when I'm told to do it,
Right.
how I'm told to do it. But then there are those people, and it's the restless souls that want to have a go at something.
Yeah.
They don't quite know what will happen and where it will lead them, but they're prepared to take that little bit of a risk and to back themselves. And I think the big thing for me is when people in Allica try something, they're applauded because we learn, and it's from that learning that we get better. So going back to your question about how we build these teams so quickly and get them contributing so quickly is because we've created this environment where it feels safe and comfortable and exciting to experiment and to fail, of course, in the right way. For your listeners, if you have a bank account with Allica, your money is safe. But it is encouraging that culture of go and try something, see what happens. If nothing else, you'll learn.
I wonder, have you got an example of failure, of what that means, and how it's, when we say celebrate, what does the failure look like, and what does celebration look like?
We've done a lot of experimenting this year as an organisation, looking at sales channels, looking at different approaches to marketing. And the easy thing would be to say, that might not work, so let's not try it. It might be, do we be a little bit more edgy, a little bit more out there with the messaging that we put out? Well, we're a bank and we perhaps shouldn't do that just in case. Well, we have tried these types of sales channels before and they haven't worked. And so in previous places, it would have been enough just to have had those conversations and then to say, okay, let's not do it. What we will do here is we will back ourselves to experiment, and we will learn quickly, and we will always bank those learns and use them to improve the next time. So we've stood up sales channels that, quite frankly, haven't worked as well as we would have liked. And rather than simply saying to everybody, well, that was an absolute disaster, sorry everybody, we've said, congratulations guys, we've learned something. We've learned what doesn't really work for us, but in having gone through the experiment, we found out what might. It's that mindset differential of we shouldn't do this because it doesn't feel safe to let's have a go and see what happens, because if nothing more, we will learn from the experience.
I've got a lot in common with Allica. I've been going 5 years as well, and I'm definitely not turning over what you are in my little world. But what's been really interesting in my space of my growth in my business has been exactly that. And obviously we're in totally different sectors and totally different scales, but has been that I have absolutely had a new relationship with experimenting and with failure. And I have had so many experiences where I have cringed from doing something wrong. Like, you'll find this funny, but I actually, when I started out, I got a possible job with a bank, a different bank to you guys. And I was so excited. They said, great, come and do a workshop for us. And I went, amazing. And she said, right, how much would you charge? And I'd phone my dad going, I just don't know my pricing, Dad. Like, what do you think? Because you don't know. Like, how do you price yourself up? And he just said, well, they're a bank. They'll be loaded. Go large. And I went, what, for like a 1 hour workshop? What do you reckon? And he went, just go for it. So I just went, okay. So I went, £2,000 for 1 hour. And she went, what? And I went, £2,000? And she said, no, that's ridiculous. I went, oh, what were you thinking? And she said, well, we've had people do workshops for 1 hour and their top end is like, in the end of COVID, was about 300 or 400 quid. And I went, okay, I'll do 300 quid.
Although I would have made the argument that they might not have been you, Dolly.
Thank you very much, Gareth. Thank you. But in that moment, I looked so unprofessional, coming from £2,000 down to 400, 300. And then I didn't get the job, and I remember cringing so much inwardly, but it was such an amazing experience because I went, right, I really need to dig in to my pricing and really see what my competitors are doing. And I mean, it's a stupid example, but it's just one of those terrible failures where I could have left going, oh no, I've lost that whole opportunity. Oh no. But it meant that I got really clear on my pricing strategy, reached out to loads of people in my space, went, how do you do it? What do you do? I didn't really have a strategy around my pricing. What is it? And got really clear on it, so that the next time I wasn't a bit clearer, I was so confident. I had it all laid out, which meant that I grew a lot from that.
And we've talked a lot, haven't we, about expanding comfort zones. And again, it's this thing for me. Great leaders are never afraid to experiment. They're never afraid to try something. And they're almost always looking at ways in which they can step outside their comfort zone. And I always tried to make sure that I go to bed every single night having put myself in a slightly uncomfortable position at some point during the day.
Oh, wow.
Because that's where I get the best learns from. There are so many times when I do have this thing in my head that says, just play it safe, Gareth. You don't need this today. You've had a busy few weeks. Do you need to make yourself feel uncomfortable? I must admit it was very difficult to do that when I started out leading teams 10 years ago, because it really, really felt deeply, deeply uncomfortable. And I was putting myself in situations where I was open to being challenged, I was open to being questioned, and it often felt quite raw and personal. But I kept doing it to the point now where it almost becomes second nature. It's almost like on autopilot. There will be points during the day where I will go and do something that I wouldn't have done yesterday.
Yeah.
But I'm comfortable to challenge myself to be uncomfortable today. And again, you learn so much from doing that.
You really do. And I think, funnily enough, so I was with some of your colleagues yesterday, and my icebreaker was in pairs, share, if you had to learn a brand new sport now, what would it be and why? And it's a really fun question, actually, because I took up a new sport. I was telling them I took up kite surfing in the summer. And I mean, this is just in a physical basic level, but because we're all so locked into laptops, we are so detached from being in our bodies and doing something outside of it. And we are also busy that actually learning new things and being outside of our comfort zone is almost a luxury that people don't feel they have time for. But there's something we were talking about. What would it feel like to learn a new sport? What did it feel like learning kite surfing, getting out of your comfort zone? It was such a metaphor for my business. And actually in pushing ourselves in life into new experiences and new spaces, which we don't do anymore because we're all living just these kind of quite one-dimensional spaces. We're not in community as much. We're not having conversations with different types of people as much. It's just a bit more static, isn't it? The way we're working at home on our laptops. So putting ourselves in spaces to be out of our comfort zone, to grow and learn, actually does so much for our performance in business. It gets us more comfortable with that thrill of learning something new.
Yeah. I think for me it would be karate.
No way.
But I dread to think how that would end up.
Do it.
Yeah. I think. Well, there you go. That's going to happen now.
Next time I see, I'll be like, how's the karate? Gareth, I want to go back to this thing of grow, because from my perspective, it's like, oh wow, you're growing teams fast. They've got initiative. They're great people. You interview them with great questions, but how are you sustaining talent?
It's a great question. I've always felt quite strongly that we create an environment that's high on support but high on challenge, and that's always been the way I've sought to lead teams. First and foremost, the people know that I've got their back. I'm there to lead from the front. I'm there to guide them, to counsel, to help them. But with that comes a challenging mindset. And by that, I don't mean a case of tell me why you haven't done this or why haven't you delivered that. It's much more about helping challenge them to think bigger, to think beyond what they're currently doing, to challenge themselves to improve every day. And so I think what people find when they join Allica is they've joined us because they are purpose and mission driven, and they stay because every single day they are learning new things and they're being pushed out of their comfort zones in a way that's quite invigorating, in a way that's incredibly stimulating. When you've done a job for so long and it is a tick this box, do that, then do this, then go on to the next thing, and suddenly you find yourself in an environment where constantly we are building, we are changing, we are asking some really big questions and solving for problems. And you're a part of that. And you can see that you are making a difference day in, day out by the things that you do. And I think Allica has done a very good job of creating a culture where it's people can see and feel that what they do matters and is making a difference. So that's, for me, the key. You know, people come here because they believe in the mission, but they stay because they find themselves energized on a daily basis and are constantly learning.
That's really, really exciting, and I can just feel the energy on that. But in terms of, so I have two questions really. As a leader, how do you do your day job and hold that as well? With all due respect, it could just sound like you're an incredible pastor, just sort of, like encouraging. But I know that you're a high performer yourself and you are mechanically doing work yourself and many hours of the day. You have two children. Like, how do you hold together the management of that?
So I don't detach the two. As far as I'm concerned, the tasks that I have to do, I will still do in a way where I am curious, where I am probing, where I am genuinely interested. I can recall a few years ago, actually, because this one really stuck with me. I was with a business and we were walking around the factory. It was a mattress factory of all places. And I can remember asking so many questions. Where do you get your supply from, and how does this work, and what makes that? And we got to the end, and the managing director of this business turned to me and he said, "I'm so exhausted." He said, "I'm either going to have to hire you to run our business, or I'm going to have to ask you to leave." And as we were leaving, my colleague turned to me and she said, "Gareth," she said, "I've got to ask the question, how is it that you come across like you're so genuinely interested?" And I said, "Well, I've got a bit of a news flash for you. I am."
Yeah.
It's real. And so, whenever there are tasks to be done, and you're right, we are a bank, we are here to lend people money. We are here to open up bank accounts. We're here to help them make their money work harder. All of that still needs to be done. But it can be done in a way that doesn't feel task focused, with the right attitude and mindset. And so we will always know we've got stuff to get done, and we are very good at executing at Allica. But we do that from a place of not seeing things as a task, but actually seeing things as an opportunity. And people's mindset is different. It's not, I've got to move from A to get to B to get to C. It's well, could I go off in this different direction and learn something? And actually, if I ask that question, does that mean I can add more value to the organization or to my client? And so I don't detach the two. The culture and the mindset and getting things done are intrinsically linked. So it is not about hitting the target and completely missing the point. It's about getting to that target, doing the right things for your clients, but in the right way. Because quite frankly, the moment it starts feeling like a task and a process, I would hazard a guess that all of my team would get up and leave.
Do you know, it's really interesting. I'm having a real shift. I had a conversation last session's podcast with a thought leader called Oleg, and he was saying that time management is, I'm sure it was him saying it, is not the thing. Everyone's like, oh, my time management, my work-life balance, time management. He said it's about energy management. And I think that's a really fascinating paradigm shift, because it's thinking about task management sounds so efficient and effective, but actually we're all just on the road to nowhere trying to like play Tetris, aren't we? Of just like, ding, that goes there, that goes there, that goes there, a line, great. And we're looking for these cognitive loops to be completed, and they never are. And so just even the kind of paradigm of time management is such a exhausting, never-ending game of Tetris. Whereas if we change it to this space of energy management, it's a bit like what you're saying, that holistic approach to genuinely being interested in the tasks and the people in front of you. It's a more holistic approach. Changes the rhythm, doesn't it?
It does. And of course, you will have moments in your work where you will feel as though you're not getting the same amount of energy from something as you might another thing that you've done previously.
Yeah.
We have to all accept the very real realities that sometimes work is hard. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you're in a hole and it feels really difficult to be in a position to climb out of it. Mm-hmm. But as I always say to the teams, and it's one of the reasons why I always ask the question, where do you get your energy from? Because if you're in a position to make sure that every day you are doing something, and it may only be small things that give you your energy, that means that when you have those moments and those times during the day where perhaps you're not getting the same sense of energy, you can tolerate it because you know that you can pull a lever to go and do something that is going to invigorate you. And I think that's the really important thing for me, because I don't believe in time management. Time management is about tasks and it's about process. It's not about attitude and it's not about mindset. And the great people that I work with, time management just happens.
Yeah.
It's not deliberate. It's because they are working out where they can spend their time, where they get the most sense of achievement and motivation, i.e. when they have their energy levels at their highest.
But then we don't want to throw, I know you're not, but don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there are those kind of like, those big rocks that we have to do, those big tasks, those SMART goals, those specific metrics that we have to hit. How do you hold the mechanics of that within this concept? Because we can be conceptual, but then actually I know some people will be listening going, it's all well and good, but we still got to do stuff. So and you're credible, you do loads of stuff, so how do you hold that?
I mean, first and foremost, we are an incredibly data driven organization,
right?
And what that means in practice is all of our teams have a really clear sense of what does success look like. Mm-hmm. They understand what it is that they need to do from an input standpoint to drive the right outcomes, not outputs, the right outcomes.
Nice.
And we are constantly communicating the why. We are constantly talking about where we are on the journey, what is coming next, what levers that we can pull to make sure that we're even more successful than we were the quarter before or the month before. Mm-hmm. And I think it's having that visibility first and foremost, and then that real clear sense of how can I influence things. And I worked in places where everybody had targets. Your target is this. And you'd ask people, do you believe you can achieve that? And you'd get a few people that would say, do you know what? I might get lucky this year, and with a fair run of it, I might just get over the line. And you'd have others that would say, there's no way that's possible. Not in a million years. That's too big. Allica people do not sit here and say, oh my God, I can't achieve this. They don't sit here and say that number is too high. They know the number is the number, but what they will always believe is that if they do the right things in the right way, the results will come. And so I used to use a terrible phrase, and I drive my team mad about it. It's not about hitting the target, but missing the point. And what I mean by that is there are so many organizations that focus on nothing but the target.
Yeah.
But they get to it in a way where the people are absolutely exhausted. They're burnt out. they're incredibly frustrated, they haven't enjoyed the experience. So for me, getting to the end goal, whatever that might be, is about enjoying the journey, feeling a real sense of achievement and purpose when you get there. But actually you look back on it and you think, yeah, do you know what? Even during the down times, I learnt a lot.
Yeah. I mean, if we, just as parents, if we could create an education system for them like that, wouldn't that be great at the end of their school years to just go, I learnt so much, I enjoyed the journey. That's, but we're just like, get A stars, get A's. It's just, It would be, but amazing, because I think that so many businesses are just a follow-on of our education system actually and how they're run. And there is this brave new world where we get to redefine it. And I mean, slightly going off on a tangent, but I realise now in leadership that we don't have communities with priests and chaplains and community groups like we did. And so actually leadership now is about that. It's being able to, pastor or counsel your people. Like, these are skills we now need to bring into the workplace. Corporation is the Latin word, for the body, and we hold together a body of people and have to help that body grow well, as opposed to it being what it was, which was task focused. Like, have we hit the factory levels? Ding, 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 ding. That at the tail end of Victorian stuff. We are in this brave new world, and it's a new era for leadership, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's incredibly exciting.
Yeah.
And I think when I look at some of the great leaders that I've been lucky enough to work with and learn from, they already had worked out the new paradigm. They'd already worked out that leadership wasn't about saying to people, hit these numbers, do this, do that. They'd worked out that if you can genuinely trust your people, if you really care, if you believe in them and you back them and you support them to grow both personally and professionally, they will deliver for you in spades. But that often requires a huge amount of trust to lean into, because I think it's so scary. Certainly I remember when I was starting out as a leader, saying to myself, I need to make sure I'm talking about the targets every single second of every single day, because the moment that I stop talking about the targets, will the team stop focusing on them?
Yeah.
And actually, it was the opposite, because I've worked in environments where people became so frustrated and jaded with being constantly told what to do and when to do, that they get there, but they get there in a way that was completely not sustainable. And that's the point.
Yeah, you get bent out of shape if that's the focus, isn't it? It's just, you're just having to dance to someone else's drumbeat. And it's that extrinsic thing, whereas we want intrinsic motivation, and that is the sustainable way, isn't it, for how to do life, is that it comes from within. So if someone was listening now and they're like, Gareth, this is all well and good, I've got a team that I am wanting to grow, and I love everything you said, what would be the 3 things that you would tell them to do?
You will have ideas that you will be saying to yourself, maybe I shouldn't do that, and maybe now's not the time for this. So what I'd say is be true to your convictions and back yourself, because even if you fall flat on your face, you will learn something and you will be better for it. Mm-hmm. The second thing I would say is trust your people. I mean, really trust them. That can be quite scary. And lots of leaders that I've worked with feel a strong sense and need to control things. If they're not in control, then they're not doing their job. And actually, the most important thing you can do from a control perspective is let go and trust the people. Equip them with the tools and the environment to be successful, and then back them 100% of the way. So that would be the second. And the third thing I would say is have fun and find ways to have fun, because we all spend so much of our time in work. And the moment we start to see work as work and task and nothing more than a process, we've got a problem. And so having fun for me is about making connections, spending time with new people each day, learning from those around you, and enjoying the ride, celebrating the failures just as much as the successes. Those would be my three things.
I love that. I think that third point is so significant because in it, it's also like playing bigger. So how can I do this rather monotonous task in a way that's a bit more fun?
Yeah.
It puts us into a growth space. So I'm just thinking I've got a task that I keep procrastinating on because I'm just like, well, that's a big spreadsheet job. But even then I'm like, okay, I haven't even thought of that paradigm. How could I make that more fun, more enjoyable to do? Which just puts you into a growth mindset of like, great, actually, maybe there's something I can invent around that or create to make it actually really energizing.
I'm perhaps going to show how sad I am here, Dolly, but I love nothing more than spending time with a good Excel.
I might get you to do it for me.
I wait with absolute pleasure.
That's hilarious. Just going on the second one, I just want to understand something. How do you trust your people if you've only just recruited them?
You have to start with a place of trust. I strongly believe that if I have recruited people and on day one I can't trust them, then I've done something very, very wrong. And so, of course there are times where people will steer off the path, or they will get themselves into a spot of challenge or a spot of bother. But it doesn't mean you stop trusting them. It doesn't mean you stop believing in them. It just means you find a way to guide and counsel them back onto the path, and knowing that they will be better for having had that experience. The key is you don't not intervene. And I've seen lots of leaders over the years who've written people off as a lost cause and have said, well, this person will end up where they'll end up because they can't do it. My thing has always been everybody has the desire and the want to be the best that they can be. And sometimes it's about helping them find the way. Always, in fact, it's about helping them find the way.
I love that. It's so true. I mean, you've heard me say that what my big quote in life is, and people disagree with this, but hear me out. No one wakes up and thinks, how can I be a complete dickhead today? But many of us are. So what's going on? And it's that thing of like, no one sets out to be a waste of space or useless. They just don't. They wake up and they're just doing their best. And we as leaders can't just write them off from some kind of misunderstanding of them. It is our job to figure out why they're not realizing their intentions. Why let's help them become who they deep down really want to be. So Gareth, what I really want to know, where the dots aren't connecting for me, is you are in such a fast-paced world of work. You'll have hundreds of emails and so many deadlines, yet you always seem so calm and you talk so conceptually. What do you ever get stressed, and what does that look like for you?
All the time. Because I don't believe any human that says they don't ever feel stress or pressure or anxiety. And so, of course, there are moments where I think, oh God, will I be able to do this? There will be times where I will be worrying about the what if. There will be moments where I will be thinking to myself, God, could I have done that any better? And there will be moments where I will have said, I think I've really, really fucked that up there, excuse my French. I've become very good over the years at putting things into context and ultimately realizing that all we do is provide loans to businesses and sell current accounts. We're not at war, we're not at battle. And from a very personal perspective, my wife went through really horrible cancer diagnosis a few years ago. I mean, she's fine now, but it put so much into perspective for me, and it put me in a real place of, do you know what? There is nothing at work that will ever be thrown at me that will be as stressful, that will be as anxiety-inducing as having had to watch what my wife so bravely battled through with an incredible amount of just sheer resilience and determination. So I think it's perspective. Of course I get anxious. Of course I have moments where I think it's all getting on top of me. But I'm always able to take that step back and frame things in perspective. So I never go to bed at night and lie awake worrying. It's not to say that I don't go to bed with lots of thoughts on my mind, but I'm always able to put them in perspective. And I think the most important thing is I've always believed that I can influence things. And so it's that feeling of helplessness that is perhaps the one that is the worst, is when you feel as though you can't do something, you can't make a change. And I felt that when my wife went through cancer. I felt helpless. I felt as though I couldn't solve this. And I remember trying to tell the doctors what to do. And they very politely explained to me that they did know what they were doing and I probably didn't. Not probably, I definitely didn't. And I felt really helpless. But I've always believed at work that I have the ability to influence things, to make that difference if I'm prepared to take action. Now, my anxiety would go through the roof if I was sitting here and not actually doing things. If I wasn't trying to take ownership of things, if I wasn't trying to move the dial forward. In other words, if I was just not taking any action. And I think that's the thing. A lot of people who I've worked with that have struggled with anxiety at work or worry, I will always say to them, what have you done? Small, marginal gains, incremental, to move the dial forward. And sometimes it's something so small, and that might feel so insignificant. But when you're doing that, you suddenly start to feel a sense of control. You suddenly start to feel a sense of, do you know what, I can find my way through this. And then the other thing is that, do you know what, it's always better in the morning. And I'm always able to remind myself, no matter what I've been through in any day, tomorrow will be a new day. And it will be different and it will be better.
I think that's so true. I mean, it's such a kind of basic thing we all remember. Just sleep on it. Sleep on it. It does. It gives you a new perspective, and our resilience goes right down when we're tired and when we've had too many thoughts. And that rest is such a gift. But the other thing about the small things, so with the extraordinary pursuit I'm on to redefine ordinary and add in extra space, extra things, it's because oftentimes people think if you're succeeding or leading a team that's going well or running a business or, I know my life, busy mum of 4, running a business, it's easy for people to sometimes think, oh, you've just got this fairy dust on your life that you just either can or you can't do it. Like you're just a business leader or you're not, or you're just brave, you're a brave person or you're not. Gareth, what is your home item that exemplifies or personifies extraordinary leadership?
I ran around my house like a maniac looking for something, Dolly. And I sat down at my desk and all hope was lost. And then I realised that I was staring at the item and he sits just to the left of my laptop. And it's this chap here, He-Man. I want to be able to claim that He-Man is my son's, but he was not born in the 80s. So I can't make that claim. Why He-Man for me? Well, I actually bought He-Man during COVID. And I bought He-Man because at the time I was leading a team who was a really, really challenging period. We had a lot of businesses that were in desperate need of help and under incredible pressure because of the lockdowns. And the team were going through a huge amount of personal strain themselves. I had people working on ironing boards in their 2-bedroom flats. I had people that were dealing with incredibly hard conversations, minute by minute, hour by hour, every day, working into the nights, through the weekends. And I remember thinking, how am I going to help the people get through this? And for whatever reason, I ended up saying to myself, I need something that I can look at each day that no matter what will make me smile, will make me remember the thing that I loved the most when I was growing up as a child. And of course, that led me to buying He-Man. But there is another significance to He-Man for me, is that He-Man always had to face so much challenge, and he was always having to deal with some new scheme that Skeletor had put upon him, and he always found a way. He was always resilient. And so that, for me, is why I have He-Man sat here on my desk. And not many people know that. And now I've just mentioned it on a podcast. So wonderful.
But do you know, I now want to go and buy She-Ra. It is She-Ra, isn't it?
Yes.
I just love her. Like, I totally remember her as a kid. But that's it. Like, having motifs. Sometimes the extraordinary things are so small and so seemingly irrelevant, but actually, if that makes you smile and that reminds you of something bigger than yourself that you are wanting to achieve in your life, it's a trigger point, and that's it, isn't it? That's an extraordinary thing to have. Gareth, thank you so much for coming and sharing today. There's just so many other conversations I want to have with you, so we'll have to get you back, but so grateful for your time. It's been brilliant.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Dolly. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Something Gareth said that has given me real food for thought is this concept of hitting the target but missing the point. And actually in business, how often do we miss the point? We're all so focused on the minutiae of targets, but what is the point? And often as busy leaders, we don't know the point sometimes. So if you would like help figuring out how to hit your targets and get the point with your people, then get in touch. I've worked with Allica, I've worked with other people in that space, and can really help you focus on what the bigger picture is to get your people hitting targets and hitting points.